At 79, Sally Field finally reveals the truth about Robin Williams. They made movie magic together, Mrs. Doubtfire, creating one of the most beloved family comedies of all time. On screen, Robin Williams transformed himself into an elderly British nanny to stay close to his children, while Sally Field played his exasperated ex-wife, a dynamic that showcased both actors' extraordinary talent and created chemistry that still resonates with audiences 3 decades later. But behind the scenes of this iconic film existed a relationship far more complex and poignant than fans ever realized. Now at 79, Sally Field has finally opened up about the truth of working with Robin Williams, revealing insights about the comic genius that add profound layers to our understanding of a man who made the world laugh while fighting his own invisible battles. He was constantly brilliant, constantly moving, constantly performing, Field revealed in a recent intimate conversation about her former co-star. But there were these moments, just flashes really, when the performance would slip and you'd see something else entirely in his eyes, something that broke your heart. What Field has shared isn't the typical Hollywood tale, all filled with scandalous revelations or petty grievances. Instead, her reflections offer something far more valuable, a window into understanding the complex humanity behind Williams' frenetic brilliance. A man she grew to love deeply, not romantically, but with the special intimacy that sometimes forms between artists who recognize in each other both extraordinary gifts and extraordinary pain. Robin couldn't stop, Field explained, her voice filled with a mixture of admiration and lingering sadness. He couldn't stop moving, couldn't stop performing, couldn't stop making everyone around him happy, because I think if he stopped even for a moment, something dark might catch up to him. And I think he knew that long before any of the rest of us did. In the years since Williams' tragic death by suicide in 2014, many who work with him have shared stories celebrating his kindness and spontaneous humor. But Field's perspective offers something deeper. The observations of someone who saw past the dazzling comedic mask to the complex, vulnerable human beneath her insights, shared now with the wisdom of her years, reveal not just who Robin Williams was as a performer, but who he was in those rare moments when the performance stopped, and why those glimpses were both beautiful and heartbreaking. Today we explore the extraordinary bond between these two legendary actors, a relationship built on mutual respect, creative brilliance, and a shared understanding of the human heart that made their on-screen partnership so magical and their off-screen connection so profound. Sally Field's reflections on Robin Williams reveal far more than just another Hollywood working relationship. Through her eyes, we glimpse the extraordinary complexity of a man whose public persona as the world's most spontaneous comedian often concealed deeper truths about his inner life. What makes Field's perspective particularly valuable is her rare combination of emotional intelligence and absolute honesty, qualities that allowed her to see aspects of Williams that others miss, and to speak about them now with both compassion and clarity. As one of America's most respected actresses, Field has always brought authenticity to both her performances and her public statements. Her willingness to now share these more nuanced observations of Williams offers us a chance to understand not just a beloved comedian, but the human cost of brilliant creative gifts and the often invisible struggles behind the most radiant smiles. Poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive beneath the laughter. She loved him deeply, but he was hard to be around. When Sally Field first met Robin Williams on the set of Mrs. Doubtfire in 1993, she already knew she was working with one of the most explosively talented comedians in Hollywood. What she couldn't have anticipated was the complex, sometimes challenging dynamic that would develop between them. A relationship marked by deep mutual respect, but also by the unique difficulties of connecting with someone whose mind moved at warp speed. I loved Robin. I truly did. Field has reflected in recent interviews, but that doesn't mean he was always easy to be around. Not because he was mean or difficult in the ways people sometimes are in Hollywood. It was because his energy was so Intense, so constant that it could be exhausting just to be in his orbit. According to Field, Williams' legendary improvisational abilities weren't just a professional technique. They were a fundamental part of how he moved through the world. Even when cameras weren't rolling between takes, during lunch breaks, or in quiet moments that might have allowed for normal conversation, Williams remained in perpetual motion, riffing, joking, shifting between voices and characters with barely a pause for breath. He could not perform, Field explained. We'd be sitting there having lunch, and Robin would become 15 different people in the space of 5 minutes. A British aristocrat, then a Russian immigrant, then a football coach. All brilliantly observed, all hilariously funny. Everyone around would be in stitches. But there were times I just wanted to say, Robin, we're just having soup. You can just be Robin for what Field recognized with the emotional intelligence that has always characterized her own work was that Williams' constant performance wasn't simply about entertaining those around him. It was about something deeper and more personal. Looking back now, I understand it better. She reflected the performing wasn't just generosity, though he was enormously generous. It was like breathing for him. If he stopped performing, stopped. Making people laugh, something else might rush in to fill that space. And I think that something else terrified him. This insight touches on what many who work closely with Williams eventually came to understand, that his frenetic creative energy, while genuine and often joyful, also served as a kind of shield against darker emotions that he struggled to manage. Director Chris Columbus, who worked with both Field and Williams on Mrs. Doubtfire, has corroborated Field's observations, noting that Robin had this extraordinary ability to be completely present and given to everyone around him. But sometimes, you catch this look in his eye just for a second, like he was watching himself perform, almost separate from the moment. Field's perspective is particularly valuable because she approached Williams not just as a fan or casual colleague, but as a serious actor with her own considerable gifts. Her ability to observe human behavior, honed through decades of creating nuanced, emotionally truthful performances, allowed her to see aspects of Williams that more casual observers might have missed. He was brilliant, yes, but he was also in pain, Field said. And I knew it, even when many people couldn't see past the laughter. There was a sadness there, a vulnerability that he protected fiercely. Sometimes, the more wildly he performed, the more I sensed he was keeping something at bay. This duality created a unique dynamic between the two actors. Field, known for her emotional directness both on screen and off, found herself drawn to Williams' brilliance, while sometimes struggling with his inability to simply be present without the protective layer of performance. There were rare moments, very rare, when the machinery would stop, she recalled, when he'd be quiet for a beat and just look at you with those eyes that understood everything. Those moments of connection were precious, but they never lasted long. It was like he couldn't bear that kind of naked presence for more than a few seconds before the need to perform would take over again. The picture Field paints is not of the one-dimensional comic genius that the public often saw, but of a far more complex human being, someone whose extraordinary talents came intertwined with equally extraordinary sensitivities. Her love for Williams was genuine and deep, but it was a love that acknowledged both his gifts and his struggles, his brilliance and his pain. Being around Robin was sometimes like being in the presence of some force of nature. Field reflected, exhilarating, unpredictable, occasionally overwhelming. You'd leave a conversation with him feeling like you'd experienced something rare and special, but also sometimes a bit like you'd been through a hurricane, and you'd wonder, how does he live inside that brilliant mind all the time? With no break, no rest. How exhausting must that be? This question, how Williams experienced his own extraordinary consciousness, is one that Field has revisited often since his death, understanding perhaps better than most the toll that such relentless mental activity might take. I loved him, she said simply. But sometimes loving someone means seeing their pain, even when they're doing everything possible to hide it from the world and maybe even from themselves. and we all have a great need for acceptance. But you must trust that your beliefs are unique, your own, even though others may think them odd. The empathy behind the comedy, he was a master of understanding others. While Robin Williams' manic energy and constant performance could sometimes be overwhelming, Sally Field has revealed another quieter aspect of his character that few outside his intimate circle ever fully witness. His extraordinary capacity for empathy and his ability to notice and respond to the emotional needs of others, often without a word being spoken. Robin had this almost supernatural ability to read people. Field explained in a conversation about their time working together. He could walk into a room and instantly sense who was having a hard day, who needed tea,